was better for the crop, right, as far as safety.
That was one of the selling points. Now, the other thing to consider is the time you're putting it on. Because remember, your cutoff point for the 2,4-D products is Feeks 5. You can't go to Feeks 6. So jointing, whenever it starts to joint, that's when you start having issues with products like 2,4-D, Clarity, those types of products. So if you're early enough, it's, you're not going to have any issues.
Generally, I thought Husky might be a little bit safer, at least that's what's being promoted, over affinity and broad spec, if we're using quite a bit of nitrogen. Well, your results don't show that, but I thought that wasn't helping you guys. Weren't they saying on the street that a Husky will have a little bit more safety if you go straight to 28%? Whereas affinity broad spec, I don't think they're there to say that. In fact, I'm not sure how the wording is on the label. Remember, in terms of using straight 28%.
Yeah,
I sure wouldn't do it.
Yeah, but I guess basically what we saw, there really wasn't a difference between the two.
I asked you this before on your yields. That yield reduction or slip or question of a yield slip on a couple of those, that was due to injury. That is, the weed pressure wasn't an issue, right? Or
yeah, weed pressure wouldn't have been an issue.
Okay, so
yep.
If there was an effect there, it would have been due
yep. to... would have been due to the potentially the injury. Again, we're kind of loosening our statistical aspect, but you could see potential under certain conditions that might be an issue. Yes.
28 alone will give you sunburn.
Yes.
Have you ever compared that same test and not put any herbicide in with?
Yes, actually our controls in there were basically no herbicide, water, the 50-50 mixture. So those controls were in there. So when I had untreated, we had them in there. So, and that's where we, from the weed standpoint, we did see some, when I said that the untreated was lower yielding, that's where so we had those controls in there, and you might see, 3-5% burn.
How did you put the other nitrogen on?
From...
To get to the equal, you said everything had an even amount.
Yeah, so within 2 days after, we would apply the remainder of the nitrogen on those plots.
As a granular or as?
As liquid, as 28, so, yeah. Okay. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, and I probably will skip through a couple of these slides just to kind of get you to the meat of the talk, is looking at some of the research we've done, looking at some of the different soybean technologies that are out there, and looking at some of the economics for that. And I think I'm going to go ahead and take you right down to the main question. And this is some stuff that we've had funded by the Michigan Soybean Promotion Committee, and kind of looking at, with the Roundup Ready 2 yields that came out, most broad spread was last year. So some of you probably used Roundup Ready 2 yield soybeans last year. Liberty Link soybeans were available in 2009. And then, of course, we still have our conventional soybean varieties and then the current Roundup Ready soybean varieties. And really what we've been trying to do is figure out, okay, are there any benefits to some of these new technologies? Some of them are higher priced. Some of the herbicides might be higher priced. So we really wanted to look at weed control, yield, and then economic returns of these systems. This study, we've done at 2 locations for 2 years. The locations have been at the Saginaw Valley Research and Extension Center up in Richville, and then also on campus. Because there are no direct lines that have the same genetic background for Liberty Link, conventional, Roundup Ready, and Roundup Ready 2, we basically take the top 4 highest yielding soybean varieties that we look at the Michigan Soybean Performance Trials for the conventional, Liberty Link, Roundup Ready, and then Roundup Ready 2 yield, we only had 1 variety in 2009 and 4 in 2010. So we're looking at the top yielding varieties from those trials and trying to compare them and see if any of these technologies have a benefit over the other ones. We also have some different weed control systems that we look at, a standard pre followed by post, and 2-pass post system. And so in 2009, we actually had 52 treatments that were replicated 4 times, and then in 2010, we had 64 treatments that would be replicated 4 times at each location. We planted all these soybean plots, conventional till in 15-inch rows at 175,000 seeds per acre. Usually we start to try to plant our soybeans the first part of May, but with weather conditions the last couple of years, these studies haven't been able to be planted until mid to late May. Here are some of the soybean varieties that we've used. In our conventional soybean varieties, you can see the 4 varieties that we looked at for both years. The Liberty Link. This one was no longer sold in 2010, so we picked up another variety. Same thing with Roundup Ready. And then the Roundup Ready 2 yield, the variety that was available in 2009 was not sold in 2010, so we have all 4 new varieties in 2010. Looking at the treatments, we basically put the standard pre out there to take out weed control system. So, you know, if glyphosate was better than our non-GMO ones, we wanted to take that factor out of there. So this is applied across all the different varieties for all the different traits. We also have a system where we look at it specifically for each trait. So for the pre followed by post, we looked at Valor XLT applied pre-emergence, and this would be for campus. And then at Richville, because of the rotation restrictions you can have with compounds that have classic in there, we looked at Valor at 2 ounces. Non-GMO, we had followed that up with FlexStar Plus Select. Liberty Link followed that up with Ignite, and then the Roundup Ready systems followed that up with Roundup Power Max. Our non-GMO 2-pass program was Raptor, followed by FlexStar Plus Select. We had 2 passes of Ignite for Liberty Link, and then 2 passes of Roundup Power Max for our Roundup Ready system. We did see some injury in 2009 on campus from that Valor XLT application. Basically, we got hit hard with rain, about 4 inches with one event within 2 weeks, and saw some stunning and also some leaf crinkling and burn. In 2010, just very little injury, and then we had no pre-emergence injury from the Valor up at the Richville location. Post-emergence, what we would expect with some of our non-GMO programs. From the Raptor, we saw some reddened veins and some stunning. Basically, that outgrew that within 10 days after application. Our weed populations, we had extremely high population at campus in 2009. A little bit lower in 2010, so this was our 09 population. You can barely even see the soybeans in there. Pretty high weed pressure. And at Richville, basically not a lot of weeds out there. The good news is all the herbicide treatments that we used, we had excellent control, regardless of system. So the non-GMO, Liberty Link, and Roundup Ready all provided excellent control of all the weeds. Looking at here's kind of the important things, the soybean yields and also economics. Look at our Richville location. This is our soybean yields, and this is averaged over the weed control system. So we didn't see any differences in any of the weed control systems. There were not a lot of weeds out there. When we look at yield, again, this would be combined over the 4 varieties of each of the systems, and anything that has the letter A would be amongst our top yielding system or technologies. So the Liberty Link, Roundup Ready, and Roundup Ready 2, the 1 variety there, all yielded similar at Richville. And then looking at 2010 data, this is where we are with our yields. We saw no differences in any of the systems, but you can see a big difference in yield between the 2 years. So why do you think that is? Rain, right? So in 2009, we had adequate rainfall in July and August. 2010, basically, when we needed that rain, we didn't get it. And right here's our 30-year average. So we were well below our 30-year average for our Richville location, and actually we saw the same thing for East Lansing. So we wanted to look at the economic analysis. So here are some of our cost assumptions. And basically what we did is we looked at what it would cost us this fall to buy each one of these technologies. So what were the seed premiums on those? We also looked at the herbicide costs for this fall. So the seed premiums, we figured for the Liberty Link and Roundup Ready are about $14 more than buying a non-GMO soybean variety. Roundup Ready 2 is probably another $5 more than the technology cost for the Liberty Link and Roundup Ready. Our weed control system cost, glyphosate's cheap. You can probably get it anywhere from $6 to $7 with for 2 applications with AMS, a little bit more. So looking at this, you can see the range in prices. Application cost about $7 per application per acre. Crop selling price, we used a December selling price of $12.25, and then we came up with a non-GMO soybean seed premium of $1. That usually fluctuates between 75 cents and $2. And then we basically took all those numbers and figured out kind of our economic returns on each of these different technologies. So this would be taking out, this is just looking at the standard treatment of Richville in 2009, taking out any weed control costs. So this is just looking at that straight total pre. And we saw basically no differences in 2009. In 2010, because of the lower seed costs for the non-GMO, as well as the seed premium, we actually saw a benefit for the non-GMO soybeans from our economic returns. Again, this doesn't include the herbicide cost. Now, if we look at the different herbicide systems in 2009, again, the ones that are the highest were the ones with the A's, and the non-GMO pre followed by post. Both Roundup Ready systems for both of the technologies were amongst the highest. We could combine over those in 2010, and we actually again saw an advantage to the non-GMO soybeans, and that's even putting in the higher herbicide cost there. Now at East Lansing, we saw kind of an interaction. We can walk through these pretty straightforward. Here's our standard pre, Liberty Link, Roundup Ready 2 yield. No significant differences in yield for that. Pre followed by post, the Liberty Link system and the Roundup Ready 2 yield were the same. Same thing for our 2-pass post system and our non-treated. So that kind of makes me think that, well, these ones might actually be a little bit more competitive with some of the weeds that are out there. Again, there was no herbicide used there. If we look at 2010, we didn't see any differences between the traits for yield. Again, statistically, a lot of variability out there, so because of the reduced yields, and again, this is where we were with 2009. So that lower rainfall in August really cost us our yield potential. Our weed control systems, the 2-pass systems were the best. And now if we look at those economic returns, again, for the standard treatment, taking out herbicide cost, no differences in 2009, no differences in 2010. So really showing that kind of a lot of these different soybean traits actually have similar yield potentials under those environments. In 2009, looking at the economic returns, remember we used all the numbers or the economics from this fall to compute these, and the Liberty Link and the Roundup Ready 2 yield were the highest. In 2010, non-GMO, Liberty Link, and the Roundup Ready 2 were amongst the highest. So kind of a quick summary, basically for weed control, our 2-pass program systems had excellent weed control regardless of trait, so it didn't matter if it was Roundup Ready, Liberty Link, or conventional. Now with a pre followed by post system, you're probably better off. You have more modes of action out there, so from resistance management and increased flexibility. The yield potential varied between the environments. Under high yielding environments, the Liberty Link and Roundup Ready 2, again that was just one variety in 2009, were equal, but they weren't always better than the Roundup Ready systems. In the lower yielding environments, there was no differences. So looking at our current economics, with the higher soybean selling prices and kind of the cost of the herbicides, the non-GMO had the greatest economic returns in 1 out of the 4 locations. And then the economics really favored the non-GMO, Liberty Link, and Roundup Ready 2 in 2 out of 3 locations for this year. So just kind of a quick thing, there are several options out there for high yields and also effective weed management. And then with some of these newer traits, they usually are among the highest, but weren't always better than what we currently have. So really it kind of gives us, there's a lot of options out there, and you need to look at what's going to fit your system. Because of the lower yields that we had this year, we'd like to do this one more year and hopefully get some timely rainfall during pod fill and see what happens in a 3rd year. So kind of where we're at with that, and I think I'll just kind of mention a couple things. We had some calls this year that dodder, which is a weed that we don't have a lot of in Michigan, it looks like kind of orange silly string, is showing up in some fields. What it is, it's a parasitic weed. It basically emerges, it attaches to its host, starts wrapping around it, the root